Good evening and welcome. Tonight I will be reading to you this history magazine article about Aphrodite, goddess of desire. This article was chosen by my channel members. It was chosen for Valentine's Day since that's coming up this month. And it was chosen by Chris W., Alessia, Fiona, and Alex. And if you would like to pick a future history magazine article, you can click the join button, which should be right about here. And if you don't see it, if you're on mobile, you can click the very first link in my description box to become a member. It is 99 cents a month, the cheapest possible price I can set it to. It will never be higher than that. There'll never be tiers or anything. I will keep it as affordable as possible so that as many people who want to join can do so if you can afford to do so. There's lots of exclusive content. I'm starting viewer's choice for channel members only. I'll be filming that this week, so the first video will hopefully, fingers crossed, be up by now. There's lots of behind the scenes content, and you can pick history magazine articles. You get your name in every single video too at the very beginning. I'll be getting my next issue probably sometime this week, maybe next week. So very soon I'll be posting a video for members to vote on for the next 2 months' articles. So now is the time to join if you want to be a part of that. I'd love to have you on here in our little club. It would be very fun to have you with us. But let's get started on this article about Aphrodite. It says here, a mix of ancient fertility goddesses and Eastern divinities, Aphrodite was particularly venerated by the Greeks. From the main sanctuary in Cyprus, her cult spread around the Mediterranean. And this article is by Bethany Hughes. And we'll look at all the pictures and read the boxes after we read the main article here. The Greek Olympian gods were a wild, dysfunctional divine family. Believed to live on the beautiful slopes of Mount Olympus in northern Greece, these supernatural creatures were thought to look like humans, only bigger, brighter, and stronger. The Olympian gods and goddesses incarnated human qualities such as wisdom for Athena, reason for Apollo, and love for Aphrodite. But they were far from perfect. They drank, had affairs, and spitefully meddled in the lives of humans. Capable of shape-shifting, they could turn up where you least expected them, disguised as a stranger at your door or as a rainbow, appearing as a breath of wind around the corner or as a monster in a raging sea. From Zeus, the king of the gods, downward, they were not to be messed with. The creation of a goddess. The birth of Aphrodite, the ancient goddess of sexual love, was a gruesome affair. Aphrodite's story, sung by ancient Greek poets and set down in some of the earliest prose from the Greek world, is a myth to remember, a dreadful tale. The Greeks believed that before the beginning of the world, there was an endless, formless, primordial night, and that from this nothingness came extraordinary power. The great earth goddess Gaia had married her own son, the looming sky god Uranus, but it was not a happy union. The two deities made loveless love. Uranus, hating the children they conceived, which were the Titans, the Cyclopes, and the Hecatonchires, trapped them inside Gaia's belly of the earth. Sick of this eternal copulating, one day Gaia persuaded another of her sons, Cronus, to help. Taking up a serrated sickle, some poets said it was made of adamite, others of flint, Cronus frenziedly hacked off his father's penis and testicles. Roaring with unimaginable pain, Uranus violently broke off his incestuous embrace, separating Earth and the heavens. Uranus's bloody, spurting, amputated sex plummeted into the seas below. This visceral, broiling mass drifted east from the island of Cythera in southern Greece toward the wild seas around Cyprus. And here, the archaic Greek author Hesiod tells us, in his catalogue of creation myths, Theogony, from the foaming mess arose an awful and lovely maiden. This maiden goddess was Aphrodite, or Venus, as she would come to be called in the Roman world. As this radiant teenager stepped onto the barren earth, grasses and flowers sprang up from beneath her shapely feet. Her arrival generated some of the most beautiful accounts in ancient Greek literature. The following is an extract from Cyprian, an ancient epic poem about Aphrodite, translation by Barbara Breitenberger. She set on her skin the garments which the graces and the seasons had made and dyed in the flowers of springtime, garments such as the seasons wear, dyed in crocus and hyacinth, and in the blooming violet, and in the fair flower of the rose, and fragrant, and in ambrosial flowers of the narcissus and lily. So we think we know Aphrodite. We think we know that she is a sweet-smelling goddess of love who pops up once a year on Valentine's Day cards. But psychologically, historically, archaeologically, she's more than that. Aphrodite is a creature of potency and influence across time and space. As investigations in Europe, Asia, and North Africa reveal, her worship tells us much about attitudes toward desire, taboo, love, lust, and the complex challenges of civilization. Unearthing Aphrodite's ancestors. My historical detective hunts began in the East when I was last in Cyprus in the Larnaca District Museum. Researchers were scanning a tiny necklace of golden pomegranates, 3,500 years old, recently excavated from the grave of a young child. Pomegranates have long been Aphrodite's fruit, their color symbolizing both fertility and death. A golden pendant was found nearby, engraved with the image of the Bronze Age Eastern deity of fertility, pleasure, and pain, Astarte. Along with the delicate jewelry were curious female figurines, women with the faces of birds, very similar to those found in Syria and the Levant, just 250 miles east across the Mediterranean Sea. We know that sailors and traders came from the east to Cyprus from at least 2500 BCE onward, bringing ideas and cultural influence as well as goods and gifts. Critically, in the case of Aphrodite, these travelers imported the idea of a deity who was responsible for desire of all kinds, not just love, but also lust for war, conquest, and control. Because in a region that spans modern-day Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Israel, the Palestinian territories, Anatolia, and Egypt, during a time when the skeletal evidence, like shins hacked with axes, arrows in eye sockets, shoulder blades sliced with machetes, tells us that intertribal and interclan violence was almost a constant. Communities dreamt up the notion of a female god, of a tempestuous divine entity. This sublime, fickle female god, called variously Inanna, Ishtar, and Astarte, was the incarnation of the desire for conflict and carnal relations. These Eastern Aphrodite equivalents were ardently adored. The goddess Inanna presided over 180 sanctuaries in Babylon alone. The Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III asked for a statue of potent Ishtar to be brought from the city of Nineveh to help banish a mysterious sickness in his kingdom. And Astarte, often portrayed with horns, would decorate the prows of ships plied by Phoenician traders. A totemic figure to bring luck and protection, Astarte was fecund and feisty, and an inspiration for the voluptuous figureheads that became so popular on galleons beginning from the 16th century onward. All of these Eastern goddesses were thought to inhabit the sky in the form of the star we still call Venus, now correctly classified as a planet. Cyprus, too, boasts fascinating fertility figures dating back 5,000 years, which they're talking about in this box up here, which we'll look at after. These are also the eastern island ancestors of Aphrodite. Although the Greeks asserted that Aphrodite's name derived from the Greek for foam born, it's Aphros is Greek for sea foam, it seems far more likely her name stems from the Phoenician Ashtaroth, which was then Hellenized to become Astarte and adapted to become Aphrodite. The Aphrodite who emerged from the coasts of Cyprus was constitutionally a creature of both East and West. As an entrepot for the prehistoric international copper trade, Cyprus was a cauldron of cultural influence. Copper gets its name from the island of Cyprus, and Aphrodite herself came to be called Kypria, or the Cyprian goddess. Copper, when mixed with tin, fueled the advances of Bronze Age civilization. Boats piled with copper ingots plied their way to Cypriot ports from the Levant, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and mainland Greece. Greek Mycenaean influence brought to Cyprus the notion of a fertility deity who incarnated beauty of body and soul. As all these influences cross-fertilized on Cyprus, Aphrodite, both ferocious and fabulous, was truly born. Sacrifices to the goddess. Since Aphrodite was a goddess whose purview was human relations of all kinds, romantic and antagonistic, she came to be a totemic protectress of cities. In Athens, the entire Acropolis rock, crowned by the famous Parthenon temple, built for the goddess of wisdom, Athena Parthenos, was sacred not to Athena but to her sister Aphrodite. Citizens of the city would leave offerings to her in niches carved into the sides of the towering pink granite outcrop. Pomegranates, scented oils, or cups of milk. Some young romantics in the city still honor the goddess of love at the Acropolis in the same niches, in the same way. There were shrines to Aphrodite in the Athenian agora, where the birds she loved, doves, it's the Greek name for dove, peristera, almost certainly derives from the Semitic para-Ishtar, the bird of Ishtar. They had their tongues cut out and blood sprinkled on altars in her honor. In this flagship democratic city, it was vital that the residents respected one another. Aphrodite was thought to offer a kind of cosmic glue for ancient society. This tradition continued. There's even an image of Aphrodite protecting the great Christian city of Constantinople as she hovers in the corner of one of the earliest maps of the metropolis. Long associated with flowers and perfumes, Aphrodite's worship must have been a heady experience. In the great sanctuary of Old Paphos on Cyprus, close to where she was believed to have emerged from the sea, lilies, violets, and sweet myrtle were grown. There were ponds of lotuses and arches of roses. This is why we now exchange over 250 million roses on Valentine's Day. The sanctuary of Aphrodite at Old Paphos was one of the biggest in the ancient world. No blood sacrifice was allowed, only the burning of expensive incense from Arabia and libations of olive oil, honey, and wine. Local ceramic pots from the 8th century BCE show a Cypriot goddess or high priestess drinking some kind of potent brew through a straw, quite possibly laudanum, or opium-laced wine. Given the goddess's delight and pleasures of the flesh, it's unsurprising Aphrodite was also a patron of sex workers. One writer in the Roman Republic, Ennius, translating the Greek author Euhemerus, I think that's how you say that, goes so far as to credit her with the invention of the oldest profession. Excavations in central Athens have unearthed a beautiful silver medallion in the brothel district of the city, Kerameikos. Here, narrow stalls housed female and male sex slaves of the Athenian Empire. We can only hope the protection of their love goddess offered them some comfort. Historical accounts, such as that of Herodotus, Greece's father of history, asserted that sacred sex workers operated at Old Paphos and at Aphrodite's other sanctuaries, including the sanctuary of Mylitta in Babylonia. And because she was a goddess who historically traveled by sea, and who was all about mixing and mingling across borders and boundaries, Aphrodite was much adored in ports. With the influx and egress of international sailors, brothels were a regular feature in port cities. The universality of Aphrodite. Aphrodite was adored in fine sanctuaries at Cnidus in Anatolia. So you can see an Aphrodite of Cnidus by Praxiteles. It's one of the most famous statues of the goddess. We'll look at that later. At Syracuse in Sicily, and at Pompeii in the Bay of Naples. When Venus became the presiding deity at Pompeii in 89 BCE, we'll look at this after. Pompeii in 89 BCE, the city was officially renamed Colonia Cornelia Veneria Pompeiorum. But Aphrodite was also believed to inhabit modest homes too, as a patron who presided over marriages and family relations. The great democratic reformer of Athens, Cleisthenes, had coins minted. The goddess Athena was on one side, and on the reverse was Aphrodite, as Aphrodite Pandemos, meaning of all the people. Ancient deities embody universal ideas, so unsurprisingly, early Romans did have their own homegrown goddess of fertility and procreation, whom they called Venus. Once Romans had conquered Greek territories after the fall of Corinth in 146 BCE, Venus and Aphrodite frequently became interchangeable. For the Romans, feisty Venus Aphrodite's domain of desire, ambition, and prowess in war made her the perfect deity to sit front and center of their mythical narrative. Venus, Romans said, had given birth to the Trojan hero Aeneas, who, fleeing the devastation of the Trojan War, then went on to establish the Julian dynasty. Descendants of the Julians, the twins Romulus and Remus, would found Rome. So, Venus was considered the godmother of the Roman Republic and of its imperial ambitions. In Virgil's epic poem Aeneid, in a conversation with Venus, we hear that Aeneas's destiny is to pursue an empire without limits. When Julius Caesar went into battle, he would sacrifice to Venus, as would his rivals Pompey and Crassus. The conquering Roman hero Sulla built sanctuaries in Venus's honor. Julius Caesar erected a monumental temple to the goddess right in the heart of the Roman Forum. Venus was honored with 4 major festivals in Rome a year: the springtime Veneralia, the Venalia Urbana, when sacred sex workers carried garlands of myrtle and roses and downed amphorae of wine, a garden festival in summer, and from 46 BCE onward, during Venus Genetrix, where Venus was adored as the mother and progenitor of the Roman people. Julius Caesar proudly wore a ring showing Venus in warrior dress, and increasingly Roman statues of Venus depicted her naked but armed, boasting helmet, sword, and sheath. Aphrodite was many things to humankind, also described as Katascopia, the spying one, and Androphonos, the killer of men. She was not to be messed with. She was far more than just a pretty face. An alternative version of that gory Greek origin myth tells us that Aphrodite was born from a union of Zeus and the sea nymph Dione. Dione? I can't remember. I think it's Dione. On the southwest coastline of Cyprus, called Aphrodite's Isle, during the winter time, storm waves hit the dramatic coast at 90 degrees, with rising high, curious, shape-shifting columns said to be Aphrodite herself. It is still possible to witness this strange phenomenon, a ghostly reminder that salty Venus Aphrodite was believed to be immortal and responsible for the primal urges of humanity, as well as the delicate, complex business of human relations. In the 1st century BCE, the Roman author Lucretius described this intriguing, inspiring, influential deity as the single guiding power of the universe. Aphrodite Pandemos, indeed. So let's take a look over here first. It says Venus, patroness of Pompeii. Venus Aphrodite became the most venerated deity in the Roman city of Pompeii. Archaeologists have found murals featuring Venus in many of the houses that have been excavated. So let's take a look at this one first. This is the punishment of Eros. Making sure you can see without the glare on. Punishment of Eros. A 1st century fresco at Pompeii depicts Aphrodite about to chastise her son for firing his arrows of love irresponsibly. You can see a little Cupid or Eros right there. And she's like, listen, stop making all these people fall in love. Here's Venus Anadyomene. I think Anadyomene. This 1st century painting from the house of the Prince of Naples, Pompeii, depicts a Venus Anadyomene, meaning Venus rising from the sea. The nude goddess, who has just been born, holds a mirror as she emerges from the waters. And this is located in the National Archaeological Museum in Naples, as pretty much all these are, I think, if they're not still attached to a house. This one, it says, is in the Scala in Florence, though. Venus and Mars. This fresco depicts the god of war and the goddess of desire as lovers. The 1st century painting decorates the house of Mars and Venus in Pompeii. Here is Venus and Hesperus. The god Apollo at far left presides over the competition between Venus, goddess of love, at far right, and Hesperus in the center, the evening star. The 1st century fresco is from the house of Gavius Rufus in Pompeii. You can see there's Apollo, Hesperus, Aphrodite. Here it says Venus is carried along by a sea monster driven by a Triton in this copy of a 1st century painting from Pompeii. There she goes. There's this sea creatures over here. My goodness. And goatfish people. So here we see Aeneas. I looked at that name and didn't recognize it for a second. I'm like, oh, Aeneas from the Aeneid. It says a mother's love. This 1st century CE artwork in Pompeii shows the Trojan hero Aeneas being treated for a wound to his thigh. Next to Aeneas appears his mother, Venus Aphrodite, who looks on with concern. And that's in the National Archaeological Museum in Naples. So he's getting his thigh stitched up. Very sad over here because he's injured. And here's Venus being like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. It's all right. It's just a flesh wound. Divine design, this says. This peristyle surrounds the inner garden of the 1st century CE House of Venus in the Shell in Pompeii, which gets its name from the fresco depicting Venus, protectress of Pompeii. The city was destroyed in the volcanic eruption of the year 79 but the fresco survived relatively intact. You can see all the artwork on the wall here. And they've done up the garden all nice. Isn't that? That's kind of all the archaeologists working there. Make that garden nice again. Bathing beauty. This crouching position is typical in some later representations of Aphrodite. This is a Roman marble replica of a Greek bronze original, and it's located in the Louvre. Yeah, she has her arm up like we saw in this fresco over here. She's her arm raised. Guess a typical beauty pose, right? Let's read about Aphrodite and Aphrodisias. Aphrodisias, the city of Aphrodite, was founded in the 2nd century BCE by Greek settlers in the southwest part of the Anatolian Peninsula. The area was already inhabited by the Carians, who had worshipped a fertility goddess since ancient times. During the Hellenistic period, the Carian goddess would be assimilated to the Greek Aphrodite. In the center of Aphrodisias stood a temple dedicated to Aphrodite, which was served by a powerful priesthood. In the 1st century BCE, during the rule of Roman Emperor Augustus, the temple was rebuilt and expanded to monumental proportions, thanks to a wealthy freedman of the city, Gaius Julius Zoilus, who was also a priest at the temple. Many foreigners made pilgrimages and joined with locals from the city as they processed to the temple to request protection from Aphrodite. The cosmopolitan social structure of the city is reflected in the architectural styles. So let's take a look at this rendering. It says here, the Temple of Aphrodite was constructed on a rectangular stylobate or platform measuring about 100 feet by 60 feet and was surrounded by a peristyle with several rows of 8 and 13 columns. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns. They have a cutaway here so we can peek inside. It says the cult statue of Aphrodite was kept in the cella or naos, the most sacred part of the temple. And then up here is the Trypanum. Is that what that says? The Trypanum. It's hard to read against the columns here. Sat above the entrance. Although the original decoration hasn't survived, it almost certainly depicted Aphrodite surrounded by other mythological characters. And over here we see the stoa, which goes around the entire complex here. A covered colonnade was built in the 2nd century BCE around the temple to form an impressive arcaded square. Let's read the noble cult of Aphrodite in this box here. The inscriptions found in Aphrodisias reveal much about the people who participated in the cult and its administration. The ceremonies were presided over for life by a hieros or priest, a member of the city's elite. The neopoioi, or board, were in charge of the construction and maintenance tasks of the sacred area, as well as its economic management. The position of anthophorus, or the flower bearer, was held by upper-class women. The name suggests that the women participated in processions in honor of the goddess. The grandiose space of the temple and its porticos allowed the wealth and power of the city to be displayed. Offerings were consecrated there, from sculptures to objects made of precious materials. Here's a cool statue, the priest of Aphrodite. This limestone sculpture, made in the 6th century BCE at the Cypriot site of Golgoi, depicts a figure holding a dove in one hand. An inscription on the left shoulder reading of the Paphian goddess is a reference to Aphrodite, and this is located in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. See, it's a cool beard, cool braids. And there's the dove there. It looks like he's like holding like what was probably like, I don't know, maybe some kind of urn or a little fire thing or something there, maybe. Here's a coin over here. It says Aphrodite and Sun. This silver tetradrachm, that's cool, was minted in Eryx, which is modern day Erisea, I think, in Sicily, around 400 BCE. Aphrodite seated, holding a dove in her right hand, and facing her son Eros, known in Latin as Cupid. So can you see him right there? Little Cupid, his little wings. There's the dove, Aphrodite. All right, let's read about Aphrodite, the goddess who later revealed all. In the Greek art of the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, Aphrodite was depicted as fully clothed, as a fully clothed, majestic goddess. From the 4th century BCE, she started to appear as the now iconic image of a voluptuous naked woman. So let's read this first about the clothed statues. In the mid-5th century BCE, the sculptor Calamus created the Aphrodite Cassandra, or Savior of Men, to adorn the entrance of the Acropolis in Athens. The original, made of bronze, is today only known through marble copies made in the Roman period, such as the one pictured at left. She wears a loose-fitting long mantle. Her head is draped, and her severe expression encapsulates the sublime beauty of the gods. Other representations of Aphrodite from this period emphasized her lavish dress, such as the replica displayed at the sanctuary of Aphrodite and Aphrodisias. And then she's naked. From the 4th century BCE, it was typical to depict Aphrodite as a naked woman drying herself after bathing. The first known example is Aphrodite of Cnidus, a statue made around 350 BCE by the Athenian sculptor Praxiteles. The statue adorned the temple to Aphrodite in Cnidus, a port city in Asia Minor, and was so popular that it quickly inspired a range of copies and variants. The sexual aspect of Praxiteles' statue became even more evident in later variants, such as the Venus Callipyge, meaning Venus of the beautiful buttocks. Let's look at these statues. This is the copy of the 2nd century CE statue of Aphrodite from her sanctuary in Aphrodisias, today in Turkey. Her head's a little bit chopped off, but you can see a very elaborate dress here. All kinds of depictions on it. This is Aphrodite Cassandra, a Roman copy of the 5th century BCE Greek original by Calamus. And this is also in the National Archaeological Museum of Naples. You can see she is covered head to toe. Her toes just poking out there. Fully covered. Up here it says it's a, let you see it, we'll read the caption. Roman bust of Aphrodite wearing a crown shaped like a calathos, or a basket symbolizing abundance, from the theater of Aphrodisias, 2nd to 3rd century CE. This is located in the Aphrodisias Museum in Turkey. See her crown there? And she is fully clothed with a veil. Then here is the Aphrodite of Cnidus, a copy of the 2nd century CE. This is in the Alton Palace in Rome. And then up here is the Venus Callipyge, the buttocks, from the 1st to 2nd centuries BCE, and this is in the National Archaeological Museum in Naples. Here's a really neat painting. It says, "In the Temple of Venus." This 1871 painting by the artist Giuseppe Ciuti depicts an idealized scene of young Roman women making a springtime offering at a temple dedicated to Venus. This is located in the National Gallery of Modern and Contemporary Art in Rome. So it looks like she's having probably some oil sprinkled on her head while she's washing her hands. Here's flowers everywhere. Maybe like her handmaiden, or maybe the next in line is waiting right here. You can see there's a Aphrodite statue up here. Looks like he's looking at her. Really pretty picture. Painting, I should say. Pretty painting. Cyprus, land of fertility figurines. Numerous intriguingly shaped intersex figurines dating back 5,000 years and presumably connected with fertility have been found on the island of Cyprus. Arms outstretched, they have the body of a woman and marked breasts and vulvas, but their heads and necks are clearly phallic. Some of these figurines are tiny, made of the pale green stone picrolite. Some are small enough to hold in the palm of the hand. Others are pierced so that they can be worn around the neck. The object in the photograph is the Lady of Lemba, a 14-inch high limestone figure with wide hips and a pregnant belly. She is the incarnation of sex and procreation, the mixing and mingling of bodies. Statues and figurines like this one represent an increase in goddess cults in the Mediterranean and surrounding cultures. These embodiments of sex and procreation were also forerunners to Aphrodite. So this is the Lady of Lemba, it says, which you can see is very clearly like both forms of genitalia there in a body shape. And this is in the Cyprus Museum in Nicosia. Interesting figurine there. Queen of the Night. Found in Babylon and dated to the 18th century BCE, this clay plaque depicts what may be an incarnation of Inanna or Ishtar, the Mesopotamian goddess of sexual love and war. This is located in the British Museum in London. Yeah, interesting because you can see her wings and like bird feet there, holding the solar discs, crown. That's a pretty depiction, isn't it? The owls there. I like those. Here we see the beach that welcomed Aphrodite. Many traces of Aphrodite's fame remain in Cyprus, such as Petra to Romiou, a sea stack on the coast of Paphos that was believed to mark the place where Aphrodite emerged from the waves. It's a pretty spot. I like the sunshine here. Over here we see the castration of Uranus. This fresco by Giorgio Vasari in the Palazzo Vecchio, Florence, depicts Cronus castrating his father Uranus. Cronus threw the severed genitals into the sea, and Aphrodite was born from the sea foam. Yeah, just not much to comment about this, pretty much as it says. Everyone over here is like, oh no. Interesting. There's a timeline that says Aphrodite always adored. Let's read that. In the 3rd millennium BCE, the cult of a local fertility goddess spreads around the Middle East. Depending on the region, she's called Inanna, Ishtar, or Astarte. Circa 1200 BCE, the Mycenaean Greeks arrive in Cyprus and adopt a local fertility goddess, whom they later call Aphrodite. 7th century BCE, the first hymns attributed to Homer are written. Hymns 5, 6, and 10 are dedicated to Aphrodite. Circa 500 BCE, a temple and altar dedicated to Aphrodite Urania, or the heavenly Aphrodite, are built in the Athenian Agora. Circa 350 BCE, the sculptor Praxiteles makes a statue of Aphrodite for the temple dedicated to her in the city of Cnidus, today in Turkey. And in 46 BCE, Julius Caesar, who claims Venus, the Roman version of Aphrodite, to be his ancestor, builds the Temple of Venus Genetrix. And here's another little statue or figurine called the Lady of Galera. This statuette depicting Astarte, the Phoenician goddess of fertility, was made in the 7th century BCE in the eastern Mediterranean. It was found in a royal Iberian tomb at Galera, Spain. So this is located in the National Archaeological Museum in Madrid. She's holding a bowl there, and little creatures by her side. And then we have our opening here. We have this beautiful fresco, and then this over here. Can you see? The caption will talk about both of them. The birth of Aphrodite. Aphrodite, Greek goddess of love, became Venus in the Roman pantheon. This mural, The Birth of Venus, painted before the year 79 and found at the House of Venus in the Shell in Pompeii, depicts the goddess being born from a seashell. A 5th century BCE kylix, or cup for drinking wine, is decorated with an image of Aphrodite riding a goose. Can you see? There's Aphrodite, and there's the goose. Having just a little cheeky flight there. And here, of course, we have beautiful Aphrodite. You can see the seashell. And little cherubs around her. But yeah, that's going to be it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good